guys? Welcome back to First and 10, the NFL football podcast over here on Clueless Gamers. I'm one of your hosts, Pete, joined in a second by my co-host, Brian. Welcome in. I know it's been a minute. Life has gotten in the way, ladies and gents, as it often does as part of this podcast, it seems, every season. But we are back. We had to record one pre-Super Bowl show to talk about our picks, everything going into this game. It's the biggest event, obviously, of the year in the NFL, and we could not miss it. If you are interested in our thoughts of the rest of the podcast, which would have been the divisional round and the conference championships, we're going to talk about that in the second half of this video. There'll be timestamps down below, but we're going to kick off with the Super Bowl, and then we'll talk about some of that and tie it into some NFL news and coaching hires and not hires and stuff like that. With that all being said, Bri, we are back. Welcome back. It's First and 10. We're here. It's the pre-show, the pick show for the Super Bowl, man. How are you?
I'm doing well. It's good to see you as always. And unfortunately, we've kind of been off the grid here during a key
We have.
part in the NFL calendar. But great to be on here on the eve of the Super Bowl, the big game. I mean, this is what football fans live for, regardless of where your team stands. Of course, a year ago, this time we were getting ready for your
Yeah.
Los Angeles Rams. And it's amazing how things change in one calendar
Yeah, the
year.
good old
But
days.
I think we're in for a heck of a game coming up. I really think it's a great matchup on a lot of levels.
Yeah, I'm really excited. Hey, it doesn't, believe it or not, it actually doesn't happen that often that both number one seeds actually make it to the Super Bowl to face each other. It doesn't happen too often. As of right now, I can, for less than the next 24 hours, about the next, 18, 19 hours, I could say that the Los Angeles Rams are Super Bowl champs, and then I will not be able to anymore. That is going to be tomorrow night, 6:30 p.m. kickoff. I always will say, on just a personal note, and I'm sure you and many people watching us feel this way, is that a national holiday should be the day after the Super Bowl. I
Oh,
feel like
for
it's
sure.
the biggest event in the United States. It just kind of feels weird that we don't have off the next day when it is the biggest call out day of the year consistently across all levels of jobs in the United States. It just makes no sense to me why it's not a national holiday, but that's a personal note. But we will be up late. We'll probably not get a lot of sleep. I know I didn't get any sleep last year, but this is going to be a great game. I'm excited. Of course, if you've been living under a rock, it's the Philadelphia Eagles. They will play the Kansas City Chiefs here. As I said, both number one seeds kicking off. Brian, they've kind of had two different roads, and we'll talk more about the details of this as we go here in this conversation. But the Chiefs kind of had a tough road getting to this point, right? Jacksonville kind of gave them a fight. They have the entire, situation that happens with Mahomes getting, injured. And then you had the situation with the Bengals, a rematch of last year where they beat them, and the Bengals were very much back and forth. They didn't play definitely a top tier game, Cincinnati, and they was still right there till the end. It was certainly a trial by fire in some way, I say, for Kansas City. The other side of it, Philadelphia has had a cakewalk. I mean,
Yeah.
their track to the Super Bowl has been maybe the easiest in recent memory. They play a Giants team that, listen, Brian Daboll, the awards show was just the other night. He won Coach of the Year, absolutely deserved it. We talked about that all season long. But the bottom line was, he got that coaching award because his team wasn't that great top to bottom. It's just the truth. There was not really one or many, even not even a handful of star players on that team. And playing Philadelphia twice, I think a lot of people had hope when Philadelphia sat their starters at the end of the season. Hey, well, look how well the Giants played in that situation. It's like, yeah, but like, you still lost, and it wasn't like you're sitting your guys, and yes, they're 2 and 3 seeds playing Philadelphia's kind of ones, and they look good, but how much is Philadelphia honestly taking you seriously in this moment? And I know it was a must-win game for the Eagles and all that stuff to retain the number one seed, but I didn't take much from that game. I took much from the first matchup they had where Philadelphia bludgeoned them, and that's exactly what ended up playing out. And then you have the NFC Championship, which, just for football fans was just unfortunate that They go in with a rookie quarterback in Brock Purdy. He gets hurt very early on. Looks like, he's getting a second opinion, but he supposedly tore his UCL in his elbow, so he might be out with 6 months or so, maybe some Tommy John surgery there. And then Josh Johnson comes in, and he gets a concussion, and he gets banged up, and it was just a whole situation where the game was non-competitive from the start. It actually reminded me, and I said before the game, I was just like, I wonder if this is going to turn into the last time Philadelphia was in the NFC Championship. Remember when the Vikings got off to that 7-0 lead with Case Keenum? Remember that season when Philadelphia went to the Super Bowl in 2017? And then Philadelphia just annihilated them? Was very much the same way. You had the one great McCaffrey touchdown run, and that was all she wrote really with San Francisco. So very different paths that these teams have reached the Super Bowl. Bri, you see all that. I say all that. Do you see it the same way? What are the storylines that you have picked out as these two teams have kind of crescendoed here to the ultimate game here in the Super Bowl?
Yeah, well, there's certain storylines that obviously get talked about everywhere you look, that everyone knows about the situation with Andy Reid, of course, coaching his old team, and of course the headline with the Kelsey brothers going head to head. So, those two things are obviously everywhere. As far as like matchups go, and when you get to this game, every matchup is dissected from every possible angle. But I want to get your take on this because I really think the biggest key to this game is the Chiefs' pass rush against the Eagles' offensive line. The Eagles' offensive line, as we know, has been a wall. I mean, they've been the best unit in the league. They've opened up a terrific running game. It's allowed Jalen Hurts to really break out this season, played an MVP level. But the Chiefs have some ferocious pass rushers in Chris Jones and Frank Clark and the like. And I think if they make life difficult on Jalen Hurts, and especially early, that would really set the tone for the Chiefs to win this game. I think it's the biggest matchup that I'm looking at going in.
Yeah, it's definitely a great point by you. It's one of the matchups that I kind of circled on my sheet there of both the defensive offensive lines for these teams. That's where the game is going to be won here, right? And this very much reminds me of the Chiefs last time they were in the Super Bowl against the Bucks, right? And I understand that was a different team, different circumstances. The Chiefs were all beat up in the offensive line that year. I think they were down 3 starters going into that Super Bowl. But that Bucks defensive line was ferocious that season. And I feel in a way here, we're going to have a situation with the Philadelphia defensive line where I'm like, you got 7, 8, 9 guys that can rotate there. The Kansas City offensive line is completely rebuilt. It's been great this season, but I wonder how much pressure with, Mahomes is, he's probably not going to be, he's clearly not 100%. Is he better than he was 2 weeks ago? For sure. He's had extra time off, but a high ankle sprain doesn't go away like that. And considering how bad his was, I don't think his mobility is going to be the same until the start of next season. So that is still a factor in this game. And then you throw it to the other side, as you preface, with that Kansas City defensive line. It's good, but it's nowhere near the Philadelphia offensive line. It's nowhere. It just, to me, in comparison, that you have Lane Johnson, you have Kelsey and Jason Kelsey there. You have probably the best road grading, run blocking offensive line in the entire league. And yeah, you got your Frank Clarks and your Chris Joneses, and sure, they could be game wreckers, especially Chris Jones, but I don't know if it's going to be enough against this Philadelphia offensive line of this running attack, of all the different looks they give you, of a 3-headed monster they kind of have at running back. I think Jalen Hurts will also be a running back in here because he has not looked right the same since that shoulder injury. It doesn't seem like he could throw the ball down the field. He doesn't seem like he has the same kind of accuracy. He's honestly probably more hurt in a lot of ways than Mahomes is. Like, that just, he does not seem right in that shoulder, and I think they're going to stick more to the ground as much as they can, even though it'll be painful for him. Every hit he takes, it'll just be about pain tolerance. And I worry about that matchup, Bri, because the comparisons on both lines they're both really good lines, offensive and defensively, for both teams. But the mismatch for me, in a lot of ways, favors the Eagles. It just, like, it doesn't feel like there's enough guys in the rotation on Kansas City's defensive line. and it feels like there's too many guys in the rotation on the Eagles defensive line. So that's kind of where my mindset and kind of analysis of that situation is right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously when you compare the lines, the Eagles is better, and I look at it as the key from the Chiefs' perspective because I expect that the Eagles are going to be able to get after Mahomes, but I think it would be a huge difference maker if the Chiefs' front is able to somehow
Yeah,
beat Philly's front. It's a tall order, obviously, but
absolutely.
I think it would go a long way in flipping the game. I mean, I like the fact that the Chiefs come in healthy. You know, nobody's on the injury report. We know Mahomes is obviously still dealing with the ankle, but he's had 2 weeks. I think he'll be, if not 100%, certainly in better shape than he was 2 weeks
For sure.
ago. And I like the fact that the Chiefs come in healthy. I like the fact that they have the experience. I like that they come off a Super Bowl appearance, which you mentioned, the Bucks game, where they just didn't look themselves. They looked kind of flat. Mahomes didn't look
No.
himself. I think that was a really good learning experience for them to be better this time around.
I think it's also a situation too where I've seen this storyline because, as you said at the top as well, it happens every Super Bowl. When you have 2 weeks of coverage against only two teams, an extra week, they're going to talk everything to death. But I think one of the points that was brought up here is Mahomes hasn't had an iconic Super Bowl moment really yet. If you think about it, right? Like they're down 10 going into the fourth quarter against the Niners. Basically, I'm not saying he didn't play great in that fourth quarter, but he was also helped out by Jimmy G just not making enough plays, missing that throw as everybody knows, making critical mistakes, and ultimately Kyle Shanahan not calling enough of the right plays and really Jimmy not executing them allowed the Chiefs to get back in that game and ultimately take control and then win it. And then they just get bludgeoned against Tampa. So I feel like there's not been this iconic Super Bowl for Mahomes where I could go, man, he was even keeled the whole time. He was magnificent. I think that is something that there's some pressure there on him going into this game. And then you couple it with hamstringing him with the ankle injury and not the most household or greatest weapons in the world that he's throwing to besides Travis Kelsey. I wonder about that. You look at the Eagles' defensive line as we were talking about, 70 sacks, 70 this season, led the whole league by far. It's a franchise record. I mean, these boys Sweat, Reddick, Hardgrade. I mean, you could go on and on and on about these guys. They're incredible. And I just wonder, can Kansas City get the running game going enough with Pacheco, with McKinnon, that they could kind of take some of the heat off of Mahomes and some of these receivers. And MVS is solid. He had a very good game there against Kansas, against Cincinnati in the AFC Championship. But like, he's not a Justin Jefferson or someone that you're gonna absolutely count on. A Devontae Adams when the moment happens. He's nowhere near a one. Schuster is still kind of banged up in there, right? We don't know the status, as far as I know, on Tony going on. I mean, they've had a load of injuries. They lost like 3 wide receivers in the AFC Championship. I just wonder, will there be enough weapons for Kansas City just to overcome this magnificent Eagles defense?
Yeah, well, I would say I don't think they're going to be able to generate much of a running game. I don't see it being a big day for Pacheco on the ground. I think they're going to throw it a lot of short passes, especially early. And so I think McKinnon is a big factor in the game. I mean, he's been big down the stretch of this season
Yeah.
into the playoffs, really fits their offense really well. So I think it's a lot of checkdowns to him. Obviously, Kelsey's going to make plays because he's just that good. I think he's going to have a huge game. And I really do just see this being a big Mahomes, as you, in the words you put it, a Mahomes moment this Super Bowl. I really just have that feeling and, kind of would add to the mystique, the fact that it's coming on a non 100% ankle. And, you made the point too, as we've gone along the show this year, that Mahomes, you feel like has been a bit disrespected
Absolutely.
at times, where it feels like we want to find an excuse to put somebody ahead of him.
Yep.
We fell in love with Josh Allen at different points. A couple years ago, it was Lamar Jackson. And then even as recently this playoff, suddenly Joe Burrow was everybody's favorite,
Right.
especially going into that title game because he had beaten Mahomes three straight times. But the bottom line is Mahomes is the guy. He's the guy who's playing in the
Yep.
Super Bowl three of the last 4 years. He, let's face it, is just better than everyone else right now.
He is, and I think it's a point I actually make. So thanks for bringing that up. I think it was a point I made back all the way on episode 1 of this season that we've done here on First and 10, and I definitely brought it up in episode 2, the guest spot one that Calibro did with us. Of like, I I think we're suffering from the Brady syndrome, and what I mean by that is somebody is so good so quickly for so long, and I know Mahomes is still early in his career, that everyone constantly, they want that other guy that he could compete with. They want to find the next new toy, the next big thing.
Yep.
And I'm like, hold
Yep.
on, hold on, hold on. We're talking Mahomes has had maybe the greatest 5 year stretch to start a career in the history of NFL quarterbacks. Okay.
Yeah.
And all of those guys that you mentioned, Allen, Lamar, and Burrow, they're going to have fantastic careers, even more than they have already had. They have the potential to be some of the greats by the end of this. Mahomes is a great right now. Like
Hmm.
that's already been solidified. Like the man just won his second MVP. The man
Yeah.
has made the Pro Bowl every year he started. He's been an All Pro. This is his third Super Bowl in 5 years. He's won one of them, maybe two, after Sunday. I didn't like that coming into the season. A lot of not even the fan polls, the media polls, and those anonymous polls done by supposedly NFL scouts and NFL assistant GMs and all that crap of, oh well, we might put Mahomes fifth best in the league.
Yeah.
What are we talking about? I mean, what is going on here? And I think this is the moment. And I understand it's against all these odds, but I think that's what would make it even better. This could be the moment that Mahomes shuts all of those people up. That I am that guy. And if anyone wants to take this crown, they better see me first.
Yeah, absolutely. And, there were games this year where the offense maybe wasn't clicking on all cylinders. And even when it wasn't clicking, they still can put up 30 points because they're just
Yep.
that good. But, there was a lot of commentary in those games where they didn't light it up. It's like, oh, well, now they don't have Tyreek Hill. Look, the offense just isn't the same.
Such an
Well, the
overblown
offense is still the
storyline.
best offense in the league, even
Yep.
taking away one of the best receivers in the game because he can make do with whatever parts he has around him.
Number one in total yards. Number one in passing yards. Number one in points. Second in the league in third down conversions. That's what the Chiefs
Yeah,
offense did this year.
what more do you need?
I mean, what do you need? Oh, the running game. The running game was 20th. Okay. Does it really matter when you have Patrick Mahomes? It was not 32nd. It was just good enough to keep it interesting. And they had a couple 100-yard rushers this season. They made the plays that they needed to play. Sometimes they just turn McKinnon into Christian McCaffrey, and they're like, "Oh, we'll throw you 3 passing touchdowns out of the backfield. Why not today?
Yep,
Who cares?"
yep.
They do what they need to do. Andy Reid, Eric Bieniemy, the guys that make these plans, that execute them, that call these plays every Sunday, they know what the hell they're doing. They are talented people, and Andy Reid, he keeps going on this trajectory. There's been some rumors, will he retire if they win it, blah blah blah. Who knows? What we do know is he is right now one of the greatest NFL head coaches of all time. I mean, I think that is done. I have seen some people, I want to get your take on this. I've seen some people leading up to this week talk about, if they win this, is Andy Reid, and I know this will sound crazy when I first say it, is Andy Reid the best head coach of all time? Is he better than Belichick? What do you think of that?
I think that's going far out there. I mean,
Can I sell
I
it to
yeah,
you?
I mean, I look. There's been a lot of great head coaches, not just Bill Belichick. I mean, how about Vince Lombardi? Is he a better coach than Vince
I
Lombardi?
don't
I
know.
mean, it, yeah, I wouldn't go that far. I mean, if you want to put him in the top 10, I'll say okay. But I mean, up until when he had won his first Super Bowl, he was seen as the the guy who almost was, like who couldn't quite get over the hump. That he had a lot of good teams with Philly, got to the one Super Bowl, he didn't win it. Consistently wins in the regular season, but couldn't get over the hump. Then he finally did. So now, obviously, he's in a different conversation. Putting him number one all time, too far for me.
Listen, I'm not necessarily saying I'm putting him number one. I'm just saying that these narratives have popped up this week. But if I wanted to play devil's advocate, at least for him being a top 3 or 5 head coach of all time, right? He's got the Super Bowl. Let's say he gets another one. He's gone to 3 in 5 years. Remember, this team was also very excellent with Alex Smith over there in Kansas City, right?
No
Even before
question.
Patrick Mahomes
Yep.
came in. He retransformed that team from the worst team in the league. They literally had, when he went over there, they had the number one overall pick and transformed them into an every year playoff team. And now you know what they are, where they seem to be a budding dynasty going on. Even though they didn't win it in Philly, he still got to a Super Bowl, lost to Belichick, played a great game, and went to 5 NFC championships and went with quarterbacks and played with quarterbacks in the playoffs that are not Hall of Famers. Donovan McNabb was okay, was
Mhm.
solid. He's not a Hall of Famer, not even close. Mike Vick could have been, maybe, if his career took a different path, had some great years, but he's not some all-time QB that we talk about. Remember Kevin Cobb? Remember what he did with
Yep.
him? Remember what he
Yep.
did with Nick Foles? I mean, we'll talk
Mhm.
about the players that he has had, the things that he has done when he's been head coach with QBs that are nowhere near the level of QB that he has now. I just think he deserves a little bit better respect. That to play devil's advocate, I'm not saying he's number one even if he wins the Super Bowl, but I think you got to start looking in that top 3 or 5 range. His all-time wins, they're right up there. They're what, 2 or 3 he is right now. His playoff wins, they're only second to Belichick. Like, he's up there in a lot of NFL head coaching categories. And I just think his winning percentage is way up there. Those things deserve a little bit of recognition where, all right, you don't want to put him number one? Fine. But it's easy to say that Belichick is the greatest of all time, right? We've said that for a long time. And maybe he still is when it's all said and done. But he didn't win before Brady. He got fired in Cleveland. He might have got fired in New England before Brady. Has he done anything since? He made one playoff appearance, got absolutely destroyed by the Buffalo Bills in the wild card game. What's he done
Yeah.
since Brady? So those are things that I think are worth bringing up.
No, that you make a compelling case. I think we don't think of Andy Reid in that light, maybe because he doesn't quite have the personality. Some of these coaches, especially from years
Yeah,
ago, like you compare him to like a Bill Parcells, for example. It's a night and day difference in their demeanor and,
very.
being a rah-rah guy like Parcells is. Reid is just seems like a very laid back kind of guy, but
Yeah.
you're right. The results speak for themselves. I mean, he's clearly one of the best on the offensive side of the ball and getting the most out of his talent. I mean, like you said, winning consistently with not the best quarterbacks. Like, yes, he can win with Mahomes, but he can also win with Kevin Cobb and Michael Vick and the like.
Yep.
So, I mean, I think at this point everybody respects Andy Reid. I just think, you know, talking at that level as best coach of all time, to me, it's a little much, but I do understand and you make a compelling case.
No, I agree with you. I just wanted to play devil's advocate for that because that
Yeah.
that has been a narrative that has gone on, and I think he deserves some of his flowers as well. Andy Reid, of the incredible coach that he has been all these years. Um, Another point I wanted to highlight here, another coach that I think has not gotten a lot of recognition is kind of fallen by the wayside in some ways. And it's not going to be the coach you think I'm going to say. It's actually going to be defensive coordinator Steve Spagnuolo for the Kansas City Chiefs. I think
Okay.
what he has done in the playoffs here, knowing that a lot more pressure was going to be on him, especially after the Mahomes injury, to thwart Jacksonville and hold them down when they were trying for a comeback, to make Burrow look human for the first time in his really playoff career, and to have one of his worst games of the season that he had this year. I think he deserves a lot of respect where they're playing with several rookies starting on that team, including in the back end, guys that have missed
Yeah.
significant chunks of the time this year due to injury. And there's not really, beside Chris Jones, I don't even put Frank Clark in this category. There's not some all pro level players on that defense. Like Frank Clark is good, he's Pro Bowl level. You obviously have Chris Jones. I like Nick Bolton. And then you're starting guys like McDuffie, who's a rookie in the defensive backfield, and several other ones. I think he deserves some respect as well of what he has done in the game plans he has crafted. And I'm very fascinated to see what kind of game plan he's going to have against Philadelphia, because I imagine in a large way it will be effective.
Yeah, and to that point, I'm really curious about the matchup of the young Chiefs secondary and some of the guys that you mentioned going against the beasts that the Eagles have to offer on the outside with A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith and Dallas Goedert, he's not Travis Kelce, but he's a darn good
He's
tight end in
good.
this league. And those three can do a lot of damage. So yeah, I'm curious about the game plan as well, and I'm curious what we're going to see from Jalen Hurts too, because
For
the
sure.
Super Bowl, it's a different stage. It sounds simple, but we've seen quarterbacks have great seasons and they get to the Super Bowl and they look like a deer in the headlights.
Yeah,
I mean,
no, it's true.
Jared Goff, as you I'm sure remember, in that Super Bowl, it just looked like the stage was
No,
too
it's
big.
painful.
Remember the year Cam Newton was MVP, the
Yeah.
team went 15-1. They get to the Super Bowl, Cam Newton couldn't do anything.
No,
And then it was
That
just,
Denver defense was otherworldly that year.
yeah. And then, I mean, the post game press conference with Cam Newton just looked like he wanted to, not be there to say the least.
Yeah.
But I'm just curious, on the big stage, Jalen Hurts, is he the guy that we've seen all season, or do the lights become a little bit too bright?
No, I think it's a worthy question. I think for me, I see it as, I think Nick Sirianni, who deserves credit as well for the job he has done taking over this team. I think when you look at it, they know he's injured. They know that he could potentially, the stage might be a little bit frightening, especially in the first half. And hey, if you're anyone but Brady, if you get off to a really bad start in these Super Bowls, it's probably over for you. Or Mahomes, you could put in that category as well. Like, it's going to be very hard to come back. It's very important to get an early lead. You know, the Super Bowl is unlike anything else, not in terms of just the stage and the eyeballs watching, but remember the halftime show is like triple the time longer than your normal halftime. So there's
Yep.
a lot of things that you have to think about and process when you're playing this game. And I think Sirianni is going to take a lot of the pressure off of Hurts. They are going to run the ball with Miles Sanders and all these other backs that they have, and Boston Scotts and even Jalen Hurts. And I think they're going to take it to the Chiefs in that way, because I think they know, and this could be an issue. This is why it is so important for Philadelphia to get off to a fast start, because I don't think normally they could keep up with the passing game of the Chiefs. But the way we just saw 2 weeks ago, Jalen Hurts was bad against the 49ers. I mean, that gets
Yeah.
lost in the shuffle because of how
Right.
dominant they were in that game. He was really bad. You could see
Yeah.
he looked very uncomfortable, like he was hurt. I just wonder how much that shoulder and whatever else he has going on is healed, and they get into a situation where they're down 10 points, 14 points. I don't know if the running game is going to save them. So it is very critical out of those two teams that Philadelphia is the one that gets off to the fast start.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a good time now if we may offer our
Yeah,
picks. I mean, look, it's a tough one to pick. The
tough call.
consensus kind of going in is Philly has the more well-rounded team, clearly, both sides of the ball. The distinct edges for the Chiefs are at quarterback and at head coach.
For sure.
And those are the two most important. So is that enough to overcome the deficiencies they're going to face in a lot of other areas on the field? That's going to be the question. But interested to see your pick. I think the time has come.
The time has come, Bry. It's currently right now the Eagles are 1.5 point favorites on most sites. I know that number has fluctuated all week, really the last 2 weeks, but right now 1.5 seems to be the number that it is hovering around. And there's of course a whole bunch of other funny bets that you can make in the Super Bowl as well, from
Oh
Gatorade
yeah.
colors to field goal yardage kicks and penalties and all this other stuff. Bry, I'm actually going to kick it to you first. I'm very interested to
Cool.
see what your pick is going to be. It's the Super Bowl. It's Eagles Chiefs. Who you got?
I guess you have deferred the coin
I've
toss
deferred the coin
second
toss.
half. Um, yeah, I just kind of had this gut feeling. I mean, I feel like more people are on Philadelphia, as I mentioned, the more well-rounded team and all that. But I mean, you probably know where I'm going based on how we've kind of broken it down. But I am going with the Chiefs. I just feel like it is Mahomes' moment. I feel like he's really going to deliver. I think it's a huge game for Kelsey. I'm going to say multiple touchdowns for Kelsey. I think obviously it'll be a close game. I don't see the Chiefs being able to run away with this, but I do just wonder the pressure of playing in a Super Bowl. I think we're going to see Jalen Hurts be a little off kilter, just as we did in the title game. It didn't matter much because the 49ers were playing without a quarterback,
Yep.
especially in the second half. They literally could not throw the football. A game like this, it's a different situation. Chiefs still very well rounded offensively. Mahomes makes the most of all his weapons. I like McKinnon as my X factor, and I'm going to say the Chiefs get the win 30-23.
I like that. I think for me, I think I'll first say before I give my pick that this game is going to be, I think, even lower scoring than that. I'm somewhere in that range of 23-17, 23-20, something like that. I think just the defensive and offensive lines of this game, it's going to be a lot more long drives than you think. And I think the scoring is going to be brought to a low amount. With that being said, Bry, I don't know if you know where I'm going with this, but I'm going to take those Philadelphia Eagles.
That would have been my guess.
Yeah,
That would
that
have been
I am
my
going to take the Eagles. Now, I will be a very happy person as someone who does not like the Philadelphia sports world. If the Chiefs win and we have our post show and I get to talk about how much I love Mahomes, I hope that happens. But for right
yeah.
now, I think in my mind, I am scarred by the situation of a few years ago, as I mentioned, when it was Tampa and the Chiefs. And in my gut, I said to pick Tampa, and I picked the Chiefs because they had the
Mhm.
quarterback that even though it was Tom Brady, I was like, I still pick Mahomes over him at this stage of his career. And you know what? The Chiefs, their offensive line was decimated, and that Bucks defensive line was something else. That Chiefs offensive line is better today than it was then, but this defensive line, man, oof, for the Eagles is scary. And without the Chiefs being able to run the ball consistently, without these crazy big time weapons, and the way on the other side that the Eagles can just run the ball. You know, I think a lot of times we've seen this with the Peyton Manning teams. These high flying teams, they get into these playoff matchups, even the Super Bowl especially, and they're not the same, right? You can't do the same stuff in playoff football. You see this in playoff basketball all the time, right? The game just gets
Mhm.
tighter, it gets closer, right? But when you have physicality, that doesn't go away. And to me, that's what the Philadelphia Eagles have. And if they could run the ball, and the best defense sometimes is good offense, right? And the best way to stop Patrick Mahomes is to make sure Patrick Mahomes is not on the field. And I think that's what the Eagles are going to um, kind of exercise on Sunday, and they're going to be able to keep Mahomes' time of possession down to a minimum. They'll keep him on the sidelines. They'll protect Jalen Hurts, who clearly is not his 100% as well. And I think in a really dog-fought, close, lower-scoring game, the Eagles are going to pull this one out.
Yeah, that's look, I mean, it's going to be fascinating. I'm intrigued by your score pick. I feel like it's going to be more points than that, but just a couple final thoughts.
Sure.
Uh, it's in games like this, so many times it comes down to special teams and the kicking game.
For
I
sure.
like Butker more than I like Jake Elliott. And I think the Chiefs are going to win the turnover battle. I think they get a couple
All
turnovers
right.
on Hurts, and I don't think Mahomes throws an interception or turns it over.
Yeah, I'm just excited to see this game play out, and I do want Mahomes to play a great game. I would love to see the Chiefs win here. I just, in my gut, there's something telling me that just this physicality of Philadelphia. I know they haven't been tested this much this playoff season, but this game is going to be their ultimate test, and I think we're going to get a great Super Bowl. You know, last year we were both lock and step. Last year we both picked the Rams.
Yep.
That ended up turning out to be right.
Yep.
We both picked the Chiefs the year before, and the Bucks won, right? So you know, we've kind of been hit or miss on these picks, and this is the first year that we're picking actually two separate teams going into the Super Bowl. So by the law of averages, obviously in the law of logic, one of us has to be right. So we don't have a situation where we're both picking the same team this time. So that'll be fascinating to play out here. But guys, we're not getting out of here just yet. That's our Super Bowl talk. That's our storylines. That's everything going on. We're going to break this game down in its entirety on its own podcast. So right now, we're going to switch over. If you still want to be here, we would appreciate it, to some of the old content that we have missed, which includes the divisional round and the conference championships. And we're going to talk some NFL news that is broken in the last 3 weeks or so, since we've really gotten together. So if you want to leave, totally get it. If not, if you want to stay here, we really appreciate it. Those timestamps down below in the description, as always. Bry, with that being said, let's talk about some of the NFL playoffs that we have missed that have happened. There's been a lot of interesting storylines that have taken place.
Mhm.
The first one that I want to start with is the last time we talked about the Chargers and the Jags and that incredible comeback game, insane, everything that happens. You know what? I want to talk about Jacksonville the next week, because what they did against Kansas City, even when Mahomes banged up and all that stuff, I think they showed incredible fight in that second half. I like the future of where this team is. I think they're missing clearly a couple pieces, especially defensively. They could add another piece offensively, but what Doug Peterson has done with this team, I think Trevor Lawrence in his second year, the first year really with a real head coach and coaching staff, has improved leaps and bounds. And I think, to me, he has shown me that he can be one of the next great AFC quarterbacks that is currently going on today. What did you think of that whole situation where, you know, Jags Chiefs, how that played out, and what was overall your impression on the Jacksonville Jaguars this season?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, a big step forward for them as an organization, a big step forward for the head coach, the quarterback, all of it. I mean, I think there's definitely a bright future ahead for Jacksonville. I probably would have a little more pause on how high I rank Lawrence. I don't put him with quite the upper echelon group with the Herberts and Lamar Jackson and Burrow. I think he's a cut below them, but certainly still good enough to win. And I mean, there was definitely a confidence difference, watching them play, watching him play, especially getting that wild comeback that they did the week before against the Chargers, and the fact that they held their own and, like you said, played pretty well in this game in a tough place to play in Kansas City, and Lawrence looked pretty good. Yeah, I mean, I don't have any problem with the Jags. I think they're a team that is going to be interesting to watch next season. And I think they definitely have their quarterback and have their head coach. And when you're a franchise that has those two positions locked down, you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah, I think really toward the end of the game, they kind of had that fumble inside the 5 yard line with about 5 or 6 minutes to go. They were right in this game towards the end, gave the Chiefs really a scare. And I just think that Lawrence, we're not going to call him this right now, but I think he is and has the potential to be a top three quarterback in the NFL, and even there in the AFC if you just want to start there. I really like what I see from him. I think there's improvements that, of course, need to be had, some pieces that needed to be upgraded, as I said. But this team, Travis Etienne running the ball, what they have done, the free agency signings that they made, which a lot of people question, like your Ingrams and your Zay Joneses, worked out tremendously for this team, and
Yeah.
that speaks to their front office as well, and their eye for talent of getting guys relatively on kind of median contracts given NFL players, normal status for those positions of tight ends and wide receivers. Really like their future of where they're headed. The other divisional game that included a Super Bowl winner that I wanted to talk about was the Eagles Giants, and I wanted to talk about it from the Giants side, of course, because we talked a lot of Philadelphia already in this show. Brian Daboll, as I mentioned earlier, he wins Coach of the Year. I think we both completely agreed that he deserved it, that he was our head coach of the year. What he did with this team, where we had them bottom of the league. I mean, like, they were one of the worst teams that we thought that they would be coming into the season. They've been a mess. We liked Brian Daboll higher, but we thought this would take several years really to reboot. And in one season, to win double-digit games and go to the playoffs, win a playoff game in Minnesota, I just think was an incredible job by them. That being said, Brian, before I kick it to you, I know they're going to make the decision to keep Daniel Jones. You know it's going to happen. You know they're going to keep him. I think it's a bad decision. I think he has shown that he's okay. I think Brian Daboll got the most you can get out of him, kind of divisional round-ish. He's not the guy, Bri. I mean, maybe I'll eat those words next year. He's an MVP candidate. I don't see it. I don't. And I think even though they're not going to, they should move on for him. That's my opinion on it. What's your take on him, Daniel Jones, Daboll, and the Giants overall?
Yeah, I mean it's really a tough call when it comes to the quarterback because if you choose to go in another direction, you're starting from a completely unknown world, basically. You draft somebody, which I'm guessing is the route you would try to go, or whether it's that or a free agent. I mean, Lamar Jackson's probably a pipe dream. It doesn't seem like he's going to leave Baltimore. But the thing with Daniel Jones is like, yes, he did enough this year that warrants consideration going forward that he can be the quarterback. But to me, the problem becomes once you see the money figures of 35 to 40 million.
Yeah.
No. You cannot pay Daniel Jones 35 to 40 million. That's when you start getting in trouble as an organization when you pay good players great player money. And you can make the same case at the Cowboys with Dak Prescott.
That's exactly what I was going to ask you. Yep.
So yeah, no, I'm with you. And look, the game against the Eagles, it got away from them early.
Yeah,
they could never get the game under control, and to me, it came down to I think it was the second drive, and they had that 4th and 7. Under no circumstance would I have gone for it
I
there.
wouldn't have not there.
And I know all about the idea that Brian Daboll has been this aggressive coach, and that's been a big part of the Giants' success, and I understand that, but that in that situation was not smart because once they didn't get that there and the Eagles turned it into another touchdown, the game was over. The Giants got the ball the next drive, turned it over, and they never got the game under control. And it's a playoff game. You can't be messing around with it at that point. So that was really my big takeaway. Obviously, they weren't going to win. They were outclassed by a team that was physically better in every possible position. But you can't make coaching decisions like that. That to me, just lost any hope that they had.
Well, and one of those, classic things that sometimes the media does, and I saw, of course, fans did it because they're fans. A lot of people I saw pick the Giants that they were going to win that game. People were
I was one of them. Yeah. I was one of them.
People were riding that train, huh? So Brian, you want to speak to all of them? People were riding that train. I'm glad you called yourself out on that.
Yeah, no, I deserve it.
It just there was just no way that people fell in love with this team. They're a great story, man. They deserved all of the praise that they got. But they were nowhere near Philadelphia. And I agree with you. Not only at that point in the game, but also the field position kind of being like near the 50-yard line. You're not even really deep into Philadelphia territory. I just thought it was a really poor decision there. One of the few from Brian Daboll this season.
Yep.
And I didn't like it. And even though they didn't have a chance in this game, they certainly sealed their fate. Bang, right there in the first quarter.
Yeah.
It was over. That being said, I think the future is still bright for this team. I mean, they have some big questions: Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley. They have a number of defensive free agents as well. There's a lot of questions here. I you took the words right out of my mouth. This feels like a Dak Prescott situation. You cannot play a guy that's kind of an average quarterback, and you could go back and forth. Is Dak better? Is Daniel Jones better? I'd probably take Dak over Daniel Jones straight up, but there's not a
Mm-hmm.
huge difference there. There's not a huge gap that you would think there is. And we've seen in some ways how the Cowboys have been hamstrung by sometimes that money that Dak has been given, of 40 something million a year. I wouldn't give Daniel Jones that. I think they're going to give him somewhere in that neighborhood because that is the QB market, and I think ultimately it's going to be a bad decision. But I guess you wonder, what's their options, right? Because they're not going to be so bad with Dayball that they can draft a Bryce Young or next year a Caleb Williams or something like that. But there's really nothing you can do there. The free agent market this year, at the least, who's the best? Derek Carr, I mean, he's better than Daniel Jones, but is he that guy that's going to win it for you?
Mm.
I don't think so. So they're kind of stuck in a no man's land there, and it goes all the way back to Gettleman and his brilliant sixth overall pick. So we'll have to see what Dayball does with this team going forward, but I feel like he has squeezed all the juice he can out of that orange.
No doubt. And one last point is I do think it's important, and I would maybe not say imperative, but very important that the Giants find a way to keep Saquon Barkley. I think that
Yeah.
would be a big loss. I know there's the narrative out there about how you don't pay running backs and that they don't last. To me, you take Barkley off the Giants. I mean, yeah, you can draft another running
Yeah,
back, but he's a really important piece to that offense that
for sure.
I would want to have around. I think he's turned a corner. I think he's healthier now. I would ride with him.
Yeah,
And pay him.
I get that. I get the running back spot. I would keep him as well. I think a lot of people have Todd Gurley syndrome. Speaking as a Rams fan, I obviously know that, but you have to remember Todd had injury concerns specifically with chronic knee degeneration in college. So that was a poor decision on the part of Les Snead to sign him because you already had the signs there, even in the NFL, that his knees were not going to hold up, even in the short term. With Barkley, he's had some unlucky injuries, but as far as we know, there's no chronic issue going on there right now. And he showed you he could play a full season, relatively healthy as you can be for an NFL player. I would re-sign him infinitely more times than I ever would with Daniel Jones. They'll probably end up signing both of them, and we'll see how much money and they have left over for that defense, and hopefully upgrading that wide receiver room.
Yeah, yeah.
Bribe. Switching over to the other divisional games that were going on, and we'll highlight the Buffalo Bills in this matchup. The Bengals, they beat the Bills, really dominated them. I think it was, 27-10. They played that great snow game. I personally love watching weather games, watching the snow game. Thought it was great. But the Buffalo Bills were never in this game, Brian. They were controlled start to finish. This game, honestly, if this is played on a clear day, it was probably 45-10 the way the Bills were playing that day. It wasn't even a prayer. It wasn't close. And I think a lot of questions have to be given to Buffalo, particularly at the head coaching spot, because we've given a lot of praise on this show to Sean McDermott. I know I certainly have, and he deserves a lot of that praise. That also means that he deserves a lot of this blame. Okay, this team faltered down the stretch, did not play well, have never, how many times did I say it? I said it with your New York Jets. You need to establish some other element on your offense. The Jets had a great run game, couldn't have the pass game going. Well, the Buffalo Bills were the exact opposite. Great pass game, had no run game. You can't go forward, especially in games like that, without being able to run the ball. And then now you have this disconnect going on, this possible tension between Allen and Diggs that we saw blow up in the sideline. That defense of Buffalo underperformed. I just thought it was one of the uglier performances of a team that has been hyped at that point. I mean, hey, they were my Super Bowl pick coming into the year. I'll fully put myself on blast. I think they were a major disappointment, and I think a lot of questions have to be asked, particularly of a team that does not have a lot of cap space going into next year, going into this offseason. Bri, overall, not just in that game against Cincinnati Bengals, but overall for a season. What's your take on the Buffalo Bills and their future?
Yeah, well, we both had them as the Super Bowl winner. I remember well, as obviously did a lot of people. They were the heavy
Yep.
favorites going in. You circle the head coach. I think we should also circle the offensive coordinator because we
Fair.
talked about Brian Daboll, and I think it's fair to say that Josh Allen not nearly the same without Brian Daboll, and it seemed like it was
For
a
sure.
considerable downgrade to Ken Dorsey. And I mean, it's not all on the offensive
No.
coordinator, of course. I mean, there were a lot of things that went on with the Bills that have been well documented, and none bigger than the Damar Hamlin
Yeah.
situation, which, like it or not, I mean, that had to, really put a strain on
For
this
sure.
team from a, emotional standpoint. I really just think it took a lot out of them. But yeah, I mean, we kind of talked about it at different points through the season that this very hyped team was showing warts. So it didn't really
We
come as
brought
a
it up.
shock that when they came to the playoffs that they weren't the team we thought they were going to be. I mean, just go back to the wild card game. They barely survived beating Skylar Thompson's Miami
It's
Dolphins.
the truth.
So, I mean, that had to be the biggest omen that when you face a legitimate playoff team and quarterback and Joe Burrow that it was going to be a tough challenge. Now, we still thought they would win as they were favored in the game and favored to make a big run, but it just to me watching that game looked flat. It
It
just looked
did.
like they had nothing left, and I just think they used so much emotional energy on all the circumstances that went on with Hamlin, and it was just a combination of things with not being as crisp offensively and Allen turning the ball over too much, and that they're just not built as a big time playoff team because of the absence of a running game. They
Yep.
got to find a way to build their team better for for those kind of games, and clearly it's not there right now, and we're gonna have to make some adjustments.
Yeah, I think they. I just wonder how many adjustments can they make given that they have a limited wiggle room. And I really didn't like that situation that played on the sidelines there with Diggs. I think you just don't show up your quarterback in some ways. Allen didn't seem like he was, arguing back or participating. Everybody was not having a great game. I just wonder, are the cracks too large at this point for this team to, they're going to be good next year. They're going to win the division. Like, that's not a question, but is that a big accomplishment when the AFC East isn't that great? And you go up against these big boys in Burrow and Mahomes, and Lawrence is coming, and, we'll figure out what's going on with the Lamar situation. I just think, does Deshaun Watson return to form? Justin Herbert's there. Russell Wilson now has Sean Payton. I think there's a lot of teams stacking up against the Bills, and these last couple of years have really been their window. And I just wonder if the window, in terms of Super Bowl aspirations, has it closed. That's a concern for them going the offseason. I'm very interested to see what they do in the draft, track their free agency period. But for right now, I think it was one of the more disappointing playoff teams given the expectations that we've had in recent years.
Oh yeah.
Bright, the other divisional game that I wanted to highlight, Niners, obviously, Cowboy game, the last game that we haven't talked about. Let's talk, of course, about the Cowboys. Cowboys go down 19-12. Can't get done with this show without talking about the Dallas Cowboys. And
Mm.
as we talked about in the Daniel Jones conversation, well, here was the man we referenced as well, Dak Prescott, right? Played maybe his best game ever against the Bucks the week before, and
Mm.
maybe one of his worst games ever here against San Francisco. And given that he's going against a rookie QB, he throws a pick there early on to start the game. He keeps the streak up with the amount of turnovers, just really the one anomaly being in the Bucks game. And the Cowboys just did not do enough. They played really well defensively. Offensively, they 12 points is horrible. 12 points is bottom of the league, 32nd in the league in scoring stuff. And another year of high expectations. We never bought into the hype, but a lot of people did.
No.
Of talking about the Cowboys going to the Super Bowl. They can't even make the NFC Championship. They choke again. They don't play up to standards. And is this what the Cowboys will be next year with McCarthy? an 11, 12 win team. They're good. They might win the division, maybe, and they'll be either one and done or they'll win one game and lose in the divisional round. I mean, it very much
Yeah.
feels like that's the ceiling for them. And now they're another team like the Giants that has a ton of free agents and question marks next year. They fired Kellen Moore, mutually agreed to part ways. You fired him, right? He immediately goes and gets hired as the OC there in Los Angeles with the Chargers. And now I guess McCarthy's going to call plays, which I've never been a fan, even back to his Green Bay days of him calling plays. It just seems like they're going to go even a little bit more backwards next year and ultimately just end up in the same spot. Brian, what was your take on kind of how that game played out and the Cowboys season overall?
I really think you summed it up well. I mean, I don't have too much more to add. It's just the same old story with the Cowboys. I mean, what can you say? And like you said, now it's going to be McCarthy calling plays. They brought in old Jet friend Brian Schottenheimer as the offensive
Yeah, what a
coordinator.
great decision.
So, but look, I mean, the game that Dak played against the 49ers is just not going to win. And I know it was both of our take. What would hold the Cowboys back would be their offense,
Yep.
and that's exactly what it was, right? Like
And Dak Prescott. Yeah.
their defense played well enough to win this game, and their defense, at times can be inconsistent, but they've got a lot of talent on that side of the ball. Offensively, they're just not up to snuff. I mean, you look at the biggest play that he made in the game, that down the sideline to CD Lamb. It wasn't even a good throw. It was underthrown.
Nope.
It would have been a much bigger play if he threw it to him in stride.
Absolutely.
So it was a very poorly played game. Certainly didn't help that they lost Tony Pollard, who'd been
Yeah,
such
I
a
was gonna
key
say you got to
factor.
feel for him, man. You really do.
Yeah, and especially because he's going into free agency, I believe now.
Yeah,
Correct?
yeah, he is,
Yeah.
and then he's probably, I mean, reported right now, he's at least gonna miss the first maybe 2 months of the season. Given where
Yeah.
he got hurt. Just a terrible situation for him, man. He had a great year. He deserves to be the number one overall back there in Dallas, and now on the market. What's going to happen with that? I mean, you would imagine the Cowboys are going to re-sign him, but he's not going to probably get the same money that he would because he doesn't have the same leverage. Is he going to come back with the same kind of quick burst and lateral movement that he once had? You like to think so because surgery is as good as it ever is these days, but you never know. I mean, these things do happen. The body taking hits and having constant surgeries like that is never good for long-term health. And I just wonder, Dallas is going to be very much the same team next year, right? They're not going to make any big changes. Nothing crazy is going to happen. Their coach is kind of milk toast, to be honest. And it looks like Jerry Jones is totally okay with just riding out mediocrity for the rest of his tenure as the owner of this team.
And the outlook for their offense is pretty bleak when you consider
Yep.
Pollard not going to be there at the start. You got an aging, slow Ezekiel Elliott. You've
He's a
got not a
shell of
whole lot of
himself.
receivers behind CD Lamb. I believe Dalton Schultz is another free
He
agent.
is.
He's a trusted target of Dak's.
Yep.
So you got a lot of question marks on that side of the ball.
Yeah, and that offensive line I still also don't consider like premium talent as it once was 5 or 6 years ago. They're in a lot of trouble. They seem to have the Giants and the Washington Commanders number, right, for the most part. So those are going to be wins there, at least 3 out of 4. But for the rest of it, all right, you could beat up on teams in the NFC that is down all the live long day. But when push comes to shove, when they play teams, playoff caliber teams, they just don't play well. That's just the bottom line.
No.
Brian, before we get out of here, let's talk about two more teams. Of course, the last two teams left. The Eagles went on to play the San Francisco 49ers. We referenced the 49ers. They're in a little bit of a QB hell situation. I kind of want to get your take on this before we get out of here. What do they do, in your opinion? What's the best course of action of what they do going in to next season with the quarterback position, right? Because there was rumors about the Tom Brady situation. He's ultimately retired, right? I'm not going to do a whole long segment on Tom Brady retiring because we kind of did
We
that
already
last year,
did
and then
that.
he came back
Yep.
anyway. So,
Yep.
Tom, we wish you the best. Good luck to you. We'll talk a little bit more about you next week, but we're not dedicating an entire segment to you again. Um,
Maybe we'll watch your movie with the old ladies, 80
exactly.
for
80 for
Brady.
Brady. Maybe we'll check that out. But there was rumors of that going on with San Francisco. As I mentioned, the whole Brock Purdy situation. He's probably going to miss maybe a month of the season at the very least. He's going to start the season but have absolutely no training camp, no preseason, no nothing. And he's a second-year player, the last pick of the draft, Mr. Irrelevant. He needs that time to develop. So that's a whole situation going on. Josh Johnson was never going to be your future or anything, but it was just the luck of the draw, right? That him as a backup as well. He got hurt. It brought up conversations that do teams start bringing back carrying 3 quarterbacks into these games now, given the new concussion protocols? I think a lot of teams should probably look into that. Maybe instead of having an extra wide receiver, maybe you bring a third quarterback these days, especially in the playoff games. People also talk about expanding the rosters a little bit in the playoffs, all that stuff. And then you have the Jimmy G situation. Kyle's basically said he's completely out the door. He's gone. He's a free agent. They have no intention to bring him back. And then you have Trey Lance that they spent all those picks on, and he got hurt for the second consecutive year in his 2 years, this one being the most significant injury, and now he'll be coming back with relatively no playing time that he's had from college to the pros in about 3+ years. He has so much to learn. So, in your opinion, what do they do with the quarterback position? Because as we know, this team is probably top to bottom number 1 or number 2 in the entire league in terms of talent at every level on both sides of the ball. The QB always is the issue. What do they do?
Yeah, I mean it's a tough one. My prediction, I guess you'll call it, is Trey Lance gets the first crack. I think he will be the quarterback week 1 of the season, and I think at some point during the season, Brock Purdy will take over. That would be my guess.
I can see that happening, Brian, but the problem is, at this current point right now, I don't see either of those guys being even good enough to even lead this team to a Super Bowl. I just don't. And I know we get caught up in the Kyle Shanahan offense of, oh, he doesn't need this great all-pro quarterback. Okay, but has he won anything? The last I checked, does he have a ring? Oh, no, he doesn't, right? So he needs more than what he is getting. You get him McCaffrey, they have an injury bug every single year at the quarterback position. I think they need some kind of solid veteran. If I'm them personally, with all the talent they have, I bring in Derek Carr. I'm sorry, a guy that is never hurt, is a solid QB. You don't need an MVP level QB, but you need a guy that is better than what you have, is a veteran, is a great teammate, and is always present. And that's what I would do. Do I think they'll do that? No, I think they'll do more of your route because they are so invested in what they saw in Brock Purdy. They're so invested in all the picks they gave for Trey Lance. They'll probably go with a tandem situation there. But if I'm them personally, if I'm John Lynch, I'm going after Derek Carr tomorrow. As soon as the league offense opens up, I'm talking to him behind the scenes. And as soon as that league offense opens up in mid-March, he's getting a phone call to be my quarterback.
Yeah, no, I like that call. I mean, I like Derek Carr. I think him in that offense with all those weapons would be a recipe for a lot of success.
Yep.
But like you said, I think it just comes down to when you have so much invested draft wise in one player, we're going to give him every chance. And obviously, they love the talent that Lance has. I mean, we haven't seen him be healthy, but I guess there's that chance that he could just explode, if given the opportunity. So we'll probably want him to get the first crack at it. But I would have no problem. I think Carr would be a good move for them.
Yeah, I want to say a final point on the Niners, man. Probably the most salty team that I've ever seen after they've lost the NFC Championship. I don't know if you saw a lot of these posts. A lot of their players and coaches, even Robbie Gould, their kicker, coming out and just trying to trash the Eagles. Talk about, oh, this team is nothing. They're not that great. If we had a QB, we would have smoked them. Very salty team that came out of that. I'll keep my Rams bias to myself. But just, see the quotes online. You can read them for yourself. They They didn't look like sore losers at all. Totally not. But before we get out of here, final team that of course we're going to talk about here is the Cincinnati Bengals. Um, we don't have to spend a ton of time here because I think we both love Joe Burrow, right? I love what he said after the Buffalo game, right? They were asking him about the neutral site situation that might happen, and he said, "I better have those refunds, right?" Because there was so many pre-ticket sales for that game. Everybody overlooking the Bengals. Well, hey, they're back-to-back AFC championships. They wore the AFC champs last year. This team, as long as they are healthy, as long as Joe is healthy, they're going to be here for a long time to come. Now, yeah, they have some questions coming up of paying him, paying, Jamar, paying T. Higgins. How are they going to make all that work? Sure. But that defense, I keep saying, has been very underrated. They played a great playoff run. Joe Mixon in the backfield in that offense. That offensive line is better than you think. There's weapons all over the place. And Joe is that guy. For me,
Yeah.
right now, he's number 2 in the league. It's Mahomes, and then Burrow is right there. There's a gap, but Burrow is right there. I'm very impressed once again with the Cincinnati Bengals. It's nice to see smaller market teams that historically, in our lifetime at least, have either been Andy Dalton level, like, they're good to win the division, but we don't expect them to do anything, or absolutely terrible. It's nice to see a team like that come back to kind of prominence and be a continual contender. What was your take on the Bengals season and ultimately them going down in the AFC Championship?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of good things that the Bengals did. Remember, their season didn't get off to a good start. They
0
were
2.
0-2,
Yeah.
and kind of felt like the sky was falling, and then they just started reeling off win after win.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, some interesting questions to answer. A lot of talk about a potential T. Higgins trade. I mean, I know there's a lot of mouths to feed and, guys they have to pay. I wouldn't be quick to ship him out.
I
I
would
think
not
he's
either.
a very valuable
Yeah.
player for them. And looking at the title game, the let's just say the officiating was not great. I mean, the
All
Bengals
playoffs, it's
really,
been bad. Yeah.
yeah, but I think none worse than the AFC title game,
Yeah.
especially in that fourth quarter. Not just play at the end where Mahomes gets shoved out of bounds. And I
Yeah.
get it, letter of the law, probably a good call
I get it.
in that situation. I don't know that I would say 100%. I want to see that call,
No,
but
of course not.
before that, there were multiple screw ups where they punted and then they allowed them to have another play on
Yep.
third down. So the officiating didn't do them any help in
Mahomes.
that game.
Mahomes, gets the call there at the end of the game, but Burrow got hit not long before that, and he gets clearly hit, I think, by Frank Clark way after the ball was released. They didn't call that either, and it was just like, well, if you're gonna call one, you kind of got to call the other there on the QBs, and they didn't.
Yeah, yeah, there was no consistency there, which I mean to me kind of detracted from the game. It should have been a great game with the two great quarterbacks, and it just kind of got ugly in that fourth quarter. But yeah, I mean the Bengals' outlook is very bright going forward, and you have a franchise quarterback. You got great weapons around him. The defensive side, which doesn't get talked about as much, but the coordinator there has done a great job and
He does.
gotten the most out of
Well,
that personnel. I think, with some improvements on the offensive line, it's a team that will challenge for a Super Bowl year in and year out. I really do believe it.
no, I think it's what Lou
Yeah,
Honoramo.
Staten
It
Island native.
Yeah, he was absolutely fantastic. I'm glad that he's staying there in Cincinnati. I want to see what that defense does next year. The offense, it goes without saying how good they are, how prolific they can be, how efficient they can be, the big plays that they can generate. I want to see them keep T. Higgins. The matchup that they build with kind of Buffalo a clear 3, and then Cincinnati and Kansas City and kind of the rivalry that's been building between those teams. I love it. I think it makes for great entertainment, which ultimately is what football is about. And the Bengals and Joe, keep smoking those cigars, man. You had a great season. Very impressive. Joe did not play a great game there in the AFC Championship, but overall as a season, they'll be back. I'm looking forward to more matchups there that they have with the Chiefs, I would imagine. But guys, that's going to wrap up First and 10 for our pre-shoot Super Bowl show. I'm so excited I can't even talk about it. This is going to be, I think, a really great one. I don't think we're going to get a lopsided game that we got a couple years ago, or I always think of that Seattle Denver game that gives me nightmares about lopsided Super Bowls. Nothing is worse than a lopsided Super Bowl. I don't think we're going to get that here. You got our picks. I'm taking the Eagles begrudgingly. Brian, he is taking the Chiefs. Either way, we hope that your bets go well. We hope that you enjoy the game, have some great Super Bowl parties, enjoy it with your friends and family. Timestamps, as I said, in the description are down below, so if you want to check that out. We tried to catch up on as much as we could. We know this was a big podcast. We will be back for the final episode of Season 3 of First and 10 next week, after the Super Bowl is over, wrapping up and putting a neat bow on the season. And we'll also talk some head coaching news and all that stuff next week on next show. Guys, if you're still here to the end, we greatly appreciate it. As always, like the video, subscribe to the channel, share with your friends if you'd be so kind. And until next First and 10 podcast, thanks for watching.